Hey everybody, Matt Colville here. I know I've seen people in the comments talking about how they miss the old days when we talked about Dungeons and Dragons instead of the Kickstarter, but the Kickstarter's almost over. This is the last week. It ends this coming Sunday, March 11th at 9 a.m., I think Pacific Standard Time or Pacific whatever time. So Sunday morning, I get to go to a friend of mine's house and I think we play D&D, and I'll wake up in the morning and the Kickstarter will be over, and at that point, all the updates will all be, I think, backer only. Probably once a week, I'll get online and tell people how progress is on everything, the campaign, the live stream, finding office space, and the book. Also, I got a present in the mail from my YouTube brother, Dr. Cowboy Viking. I got a dream sigil, or sigil. I used to think I knew how to pronounce that until I found out that Matt Mercer apparently doesn't know how to pronounce it, but then now I can't remember if his pronunciation is the right one or the wrong one. I don't know. Draumstaffer. 24 karat gold? Patreon reward. Oh, everybody gets one of these. Everybody gets one of these. Everybody who backs Dr. Crawford gets one. I'm not special. Good. That means I don't have to think of something to get him. So let's see, what is this thing? It looks like a Native American dream catcher, but self-evidently it is not, and it would be incredibly foolish of me to imagine that they were actually related in any way. I don't think history works that way, much though we might wish it did. Galdorstafir are a type of Icelandic magic sigil that are believed to provide protection, passive voice, who believe that, in addition to looking at many websites, the primary source for designing my version of these symbols, not Dr. Crawford, the guy who makes these, is Sorcerer's Screed, the Icelandic Book of Magic Spells, by Joachim Magnus Egerston, Skuggy. I presume Skuggy is the publisher. May you find joy and comfort, as well as protection in your sigil. I think it is objectively true that this protects me. It protects me from the state of not having one of these. So, it's a cure, basically, for not being a homicidal axe-wielding maniac. So thank you to Dr. Crawford for sending me this, along with to all his other Patreon supporters. If you don't know who Dr. Cowboy Viking is, I strongly recommend his videos. I think it seems like his stuff is getting a little bit more popular these days. He's an expert in Old Norse language and myth, and which is another way of saying culture. And so I watch all his stuff. It's great to have on. There's often fantastic landscapes behind him while he's in Wyoming or wherever it is that dude lives, talking about what life was like for the Vikings. This is the artisanal follower. They don't provide you with clean water. The Artisan Follower video. And Artisan Followers are, to me, a big part of the heart of this book, the Stronghold and Followers book. It's super fun and exciting to roll in the Followers chart and see what kind if you roll high enough and you get a special ally based on your alignment. That, I think, is the most exciting part of this book. And you get cool class abilities when you build a Stronghold. But for me as a designer, like I said, the heart and the fun of this book is writing up all the Artisan Followers. Artisan Followers are basically followers with skills. They're one of the types of results. You go in the follower table, you can get military units, and we'll do a video talking before the end of the Kickstarter, talking about the warfare system, the kind of the rules light version of it that's in this book. You can also get adventuring followers or followers with, PC classes, and you can get artisan followers or followers with skills that can make magic items for you, among other things. You can get ambassadors that let you buy other units from other species that you might not be normally friendly with. And finally, you can get cool special allies. This, by the way, I don't know if you can see this. This, by the way, is the current draft of the text. I've got a couple of tens of thousands of words already written, and that doesn't include all the work done on the actual follower charts. I think there's only one chart in here. There are currently, I'm looking at the list right here, there are currently 11 Artisan Followers that you can track. I may add more, especially depending on the reaction from playtesters. You can get an alchemist, a blacksmith, a carpenter, a farmer and their family, actually typically many farmers, a man-at-arms who's kind of the captain of the guard, a mason, a miner, a sage, a scribe, a spy, or a tailor. One of the things your Artisan Followers can do, not all of them can do this, I think only 3 or 4 of them can do this, is they can make magic items for you. And that's part of a system that involves killing monsters, harvesting their organs, and bringing them back to your Artisan Followers. There are 3 Artisan Followers that can make magic items. The alchemist can make potions, the blacksmith can make weapons, 2 different kinds of weapons, and the scribe can make scrolls. Not any scrolls, not any potions, very specific ones. I've done a lot of work on this to try to make sure there are a lot of checks in order to create balance. I call it checks and balances. The organ harvesting rules rely on something called an alchemy check. And this is something I've invented. And, when I talked to some friends of mine who are designers, and some of whom have done other Kickstarters, about these videos in which I'm just talking about how the system is going to work, several of them said that's a bad idea. Don't do that, because if you tell people the design of the game, some people will not like that design and then they won't back it. And I'm like, that's why I want to tell people, so that they don't end up backing something that they don't like. So this is part of my design. And of course, this is all going to get play tested. But an alchemy check is actually a tiny little skill challenge. As some of you know, I'm a big fan of skill challenges from 4th edition. But this is sort of like a single person skill challenge because it combines 2 skills. Alchemy is not a new skill I'm inventing. It requires you to make both an arcana check, because the question is, do you have the lore? It's not like biology. It's specifically, do you have the lore of which creature's organs can be used to create magical components for magic items? And then after having made a successful alchemy check, you have to make a medicine check. And the medicine check is, am I actually physically able to get enough of the brain? It's like surgery, right? Am I able to get enough of the brain out or the heart out? Am I able to get enough blood in vials, stoppered and sealed, not exposed to air and stuff like that? It's a very complex process. And the nice thing about this, to me, it's my way of thinking, the nice thing about it requiring 2 different checks and succeeding at 2 different checks is that you, the dungeon master, can tweak, which it doesn't have to be both of them are DC 10 or both are DC 15. You can say, oh, this monster is more powerful or more obscure, and therefore the arcana check is higher, but the medicine check is relatively straightforward. And this allows you to challenge different players in different ways. There's also levels of success, much like a skill challenge. There's also, depending on, you make a roll, and that roll is how many doses of this ingredient are you able to bring back to your artisan follower. Also, a lot of these things require you to have a spellcaster. It doesn't have to be a wizard, could be a cleric, could be arcane or divine. Also, all these artisan followers, when they're making these magic items, have to have a spellcaster around at the time. The spellcaster doesn't necessarily have to be there monitoring it could be wizard, arcane spellcasters or divine spellcasters, but somebody has to be there to infuse some actual magic into the item. And that's another way to synergize with, does 2 things. One, it rewards players who have rolled on the follower chart more than once and gotten both an artisan follower and an adventuring follower. Because now, even if there's not a spellcaster in the party, they might have access to a spellcaster. But also, it creates more checks and balances, so that we're not talking about just giving players magic items because they made a couple of skill checks. You have the power to sort of check how much stuff the players are able to create. And typically these items are not as good as the versions you would be able to just, if you had access to the Dungeon Master's Guide and you could pick whatever you want, they are just as powerful, but of more limited use. If you can successfully harvest the eyes of, let's say, a manticore, you can take those eyes back to your alchemist, and they'll be able to create, if there's a spellcaster helping, a potion of invisibility to manticores. So there are already potions of invisibility. This is a more limited potion that only works against manticores. And of course, there's rules already written in here for how to dial that in and make it. For instance, you could say it's all magical beasts if you wanted to, or if there were mind flayer eyes, you could say they're all aberrations. It's down to you as the dungeon master, what you think is appropriate for your campaign. For instance, if they're never going to fight another manticore, then a potion of invisibility against manticores probably wouldn't be that useful. The idea is that there's potion of invisibility that works on everything, and then you can imagine a potion of invisibility that only works against dragons. And then if, for instance, you're playing a game that has a lot of dragons, you might say, no, I need to limit this to, since you harvested the eyes of a black dragon, it only works against evil dragons, or it only works against black dragons. That would be a campaign in which you would be fighting a lot of black dragons, which would be cool. But in other words, there's a dial, and it's up to you, the dungeon master, to decide exactly how powerful are these items going to be. Also, and this may be controversial, but this is something my friends and I have been using since the mid-80s. If you can get the brain of the beast, this is literally what it's called. It's called the eyes of the beast, the brain of the beast. If you can harvest the brain of this creature and bring it back to your alchemist, this is not easy to do. It's one of the most difficult, highest difficulty checks. Your alchemist will be able to create for you potions of that monster control. It's basically a spell of dominate monster in a vial that only works against a certain class of monster. Again, it's up to you to decide, is it exactly that species of monster or that category of monster? Or I think, monsters of that alignment, I think would be reasonable depending on how much you use that in your game. Each of these artisan followers comes with an example follower where they are described, they're named and they're described, and then you get a little monologue from them. And they'll put a link in the doobly-doo to 4 of these artisan followers, along with some of their abilities that you can read. And you will notice people in the comments that there are some people who are going to like it, and then there are some people who are going to be critical of it. And I'm interested in both points of view. This isn't really the playtest, but this is the first reaction to stuff. So don't freak out if you go in the comments and you see that there are some people in there having a strong negative reaction to something. My experience as a designer is that every time you do anything, some people are going to have a strong negative reaction to it. It's the negative reactions from people that I think they like the direction you're going in. They just disagree with certain specific points that I find the most useful. Returning to your stronghold and delivering unto your blacksmith vials of blood from a monster that you've harvested with a successful, and by the way, you don't have to be the one that makes the successful alchemy check. There are even rules for kind of doing it in tandem, but generally speaking, someone in your party has to make that alchemy check. And then you return with vials of blood, and your blacksmith can make either special purpose weapons versus monsters, which is something from the early history of the game that I love and miss, and I'm trying to return to 5th edition, and arrows of slaying, which are obviously super powerful. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, weapons with, in fact, that header is the sword with blood in the blade. The idea being that your alchemist takes the blood of orcs, and with the aid of a spellcaster makes a sword that's a +1 sword versus everybody, but it's +3 against orcs. Or it could be +3 against goblinoids, a whole category of creature. That's up to you. And again, there's a lot of advice already written for, I don't know your campaign. So I don't know how often are the players going to be fighting this or that category of monster. It's up to you to decide, what does putting giant blood, for instance, in a sword get you? Does it mean the sword is +1, +3 versus hill giants? Or does it mean it's +1, +3 versus all giants? Or maybe it's +1, +3 versus all creatures that are of large size. Some of these things are going to make more or less sense to you depending on the campaign you're running, but that's the whole idea. These are opportunities for you to kind of tweak and customize exactly how powerful these items are. I'm a big fan of the idea of creating, something between a +1 and a +2 weapon. It's a +1 weapon, but it's +3 versus a certain category of item. It also incentivizes the PCs to want to go find those things and fight them. And so that's also a great way for the dungeon master to know what kind of content should they be putting in front of their players. Hey, the players killed a hill giant and now they have a sword that does extra damage against giants. Maybe it'd be a good idea for them to fight a stone giant next. Also, your blacksmith can make arrows of slaying, and there's rules for how many arrows you get. It takes a lot of blood, actually, because these are, you fire it and they don't actually just kill monsters. They just do a colossal amount of damage. And the great thing about this, from my point of view, is obviously, you could make, if you think that's hugely powerful, that's fine. You can adjust the DCs for the alchemy check to make it difficult, or make it so that it takes a lot of doses. And there's a chart for how many arrows you can make based on how much blood you brought back, and you can tweak that to make it so that maybe they only get 1 arrow. And there's also language for how to make that arrow special, and examples from my campaign, like when my friend Matt, playing a ranger in one of the Turtle Rock games, found a white arrow. It looked like it was made out of bone, and that was they knew it was magical, and I just called it the white arrow, and they had no idea what it was or what it could do. But when they were fighting Bonebreaker Doracor, the orc war leader, and they were desperate, and it looked like they were all going to die, the ranger's like, well, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to fire the white arrow at Bonebreaker Doracor. And of course, it was an arrow of orc slaying. And I think it did like 6d10 damage. I don't know. Whatever the rule is for how arrows of slaying work, now you can make them. But the goal here is that you can adjust it so that this is a one-use item, obviously. It makes the characters feel powerful. It's not something they can use over and over again. And how many they get is up to you. Well, and a die roll, ideally. There should be a range, and you're able to tweak that. Carpenters and masons are both artisan followers you can attract, and each of them, they basically have the same ability. They make it cheaper for you to upgrade and pay for the upkeep for your stronghold. And you can combine them so that now you can get really cheap, because you've got a whole, a couple of different skilled workers that are living on your land, and you get the benefit of them working all the time. If you attract farmers to your stronghold, which is natural because they are looking for a safe place to live and grow crops and provide for their family, and they're looking for a lord or lady to protect them, farmers create markets, and markets generate cash. It's also fun for me just to role play farmers, because they give you this great perspective on what do the common people think about what's going on. And also, they are folks for you to protect. Now suddenly there are people who are vulnerable. These are people that don't have weapons. They don't make good soldiers, and it's up to you to protect them from the creatures in the forest that their farms are encroaching into. right? That's drama. You could also attract a man-at-arms. A man-at-arms is useful because if you also have units, maybe because you rolled and attracted them, or maybe because you just bought some, if you have military units, the man-at-arms effectively increases their experience by 1 level, and that applies to a number of units equal to the level of your barracks. You can start seeing how all these different things factor together to create a whole system. You can spend money, for instance, to upgrade your barracks, and now your man-at-arms ability to take green troops and turn them into veteran troops applies to 1 more unit. All of these Artisan Followers have examples, and they were a lot of fun for me to write, and I hope that you find them useful and makes it fun for you to run them when the player rolls and attracts one. So here's one, an example man-at-arms, Captain Horblack. Captain Edmund Horblack served another local lord until the lord died, leaving no issue, and nearby barons sacked his keep and divided his land between them. Now, Captain Horblack, veteran of several campaigns, seized the opportunity to throw in with a younger lord, less likely to fall prey to the machinations of the local nobility. In his mid-30s, with a short crop of jet black hair, Horblack is a fit and energetic captain who believes in shouting loudly and drilling constantly. The soldiers love him. This is proper soldiering, they think. I'll whip him into shape, sire, you leave it to me. I've seen worse in Lord Armigen's command, and he won 3 battles, and all in the same day. You got yourself 4 able companies here, my lord. We'll get the herald to make him a device, something to wear, show off the colors. Does wonders for a soldier's spirit, knowing he belongs to a company in service of a proper lord, not a mercenary fighting for pay. I'll run the lot of them while you're gone. Leave everything to me, sire. You won't recognize them when you get back. They'll be on parade, smart, and know they're drilling and they're marching. You'll see, sire. And if anyone should come poking around while you're gone, thinking the master's away, it's time to play, they'll get 4 companies of pike in their face and the scars to remember us by. If you like that, there's a whole bunch more. If you think that's corny and silly and a waste of time, you have been warned. Masons, we talked about carpenters and masons. Masons also have the ability to make it so that after a siege, after you defend your stronghold, and typically, and my advice is that whenever you build a stronghold, the first thing that happens is someone comes to attack it because they don't like the idea of there being a new power in the local area. The mason makes it so that repairs after a siege cost nothing. So there is a distinction between carpenters and masons, but they both also make it cheaper for you to upgrade your stronghold and pay your upkeep. You can attract a miner, and miners...
Miners, not miners. You lost me.
If you attract miners, that means there's a mine somewhere on your land, and that means that there is ore coming out that you can sell. So like farmers, miners make money for you. But unlike farmers, miners also mean you have access to more resources, and that allows you to upgrade the equipment level. So, right, a man-at-arms improves the training level of some of your warfare units, and the miners make it so that you can now afford better arms and armor, and that upgrades your gear. So a green light infantry company becomes a veteran medium infantry company. And that only applies to a number of units based on the level of the mine, and you can pay money to upgrade the mine. Again, you see how this all sort of fits together into one system. Here's an example miner. Zoran Steel Eye. The dwarf Zoran Steel Eye is famous among his people for his ability to look at a distant hillock and tell what ore lies beneath. I will handle the spalling and the vanning. You got a nice source of running water here, so if the miller don't put in a water wheel, we'll set up a sluice. Now, we don't need no guard. We know what kinds of things be found in the pits of the world. Me brother and his family are in on this job, and he and his boys fought goblins, kobolds, all manner of beastie. We'll let you know if there's anything down here we can't handle. Broke through a tomb once. That was something to remember. You can attract a sage. Artisan Followers also gives you basically access to the sage background ability, which means now if your character does not know something, you can go to your sage, and there's a chance that they will, although it's more of a die roll, so that it doesn't actually make the sage background ability obsolete. Also, if you know what kinds of monsters you're going to be fighting, you can have your sage do research for you in the library, and that gives you an ability that lasts for a certain number of attacks in the next encounter against those creatures. And it's up to you what that ability is. It can either be you get, I think, advantage on attack rolls, you can negate their resistances, or they can give them disadvantage on saving throws against your stuff. And again, this can be very useful, but it only works for a certain number of attacks based on the level of your scribe. So you're encouraged to upgrade your scribe once you've attracted one, but it's not like having a scribe gives you these abilities forever. First of all, you have to have some idea what kind of stuff you're going to be fighting, and then do the research, and then you get this ability that only lasts for a certain number of attacks until you go back to your stronghold, spend a week there, and are refreshed. So while some of these abilities may seem hugely powerful, I've worked to put lots of limits on them. Hopefully those limits make sense too. The idea being that I get this cool ability, but I've got to go home and go talk to my scribe again in order to refresh that. And that gives the player an incentive to go back to their stronghold and not just be a murder hobo for the rest of their lives. Also, I think your sage always knows where the nearest codex is, which is a great adventuring opportunity if you are so inclined. Scribes are artisan followers that can make scrolls of protection if you bring back a blood from a monster that they can use in their ink. But instead of it being a scroll of protection, which works against a whole bunch of stuff, it's a more limited use scroll of protection. It only works against a certain category, a certain species of monster, or a category depending on your game and how well they've rolled. Spies let you know what your neighbors are up to, which can be incredibly useful in a politics-oriented game. But also spies, if you have a spy in your retinue and you roll on the follower chart, because for instance, you have leveled up or you paid to level up your keep, depending on which rule you're using, spies let you adjust your roll because spies know where all the local folks are at and what they're doing. So if you would have rolled and gotten a carpenter, but you would like a man at arms, depending on the range difference and how good your spy is, because the better your spy is, the wider a range you can move things back and forth, you can pick a different result on the follower chart. Finally, you can attract a tailor as an artisan follower, and I, for some reason, had a lot of fun writing what do tailors get you and writing the example tailor, Mr. Markinsworth. The ability you get if you recruit a tailor from the follower chart is Manners Maketh Man. A regent with a tailor in the retinue can, as a reaction, replace the result of any charisma-based skill check with a 12. This is before adding bonuses. This can be done while refreshed a number of times equal to your tailor shop level. This is similar to other abilities other classes get you, but it's in addition to that, and it's a little bit more specific. And it only works on certain checks, specifically charisma-based checks, and it only works a certain number of times, and then you've got to go back and talk to your tailor and learn more about how to behave and get the reaction you want from people. Which is ultimately the tailor's job, is not just to make you look good, but also to make you more imposing, make you, your outfit and your demeanor more commanding. Tailors know all about the proper manners at court, for instance, and this is one of the things they can educate you in. There'll be a link below to a write-up, a PDF with some of these artisan followers, including the crunch, including not only the example followers, but exactly what abilities you get and what the DCs are and how they work, because even though I know there are going to be people in the comments that are arguing about how it works, and they're going to think some of these things are redundant with other abilities, or they're overpowered or underpowered. That's the kind of feedback we need and I want. And ultimately, I want people to be able to make a good decision when they back this campaign. I don't want people to get this book in September and open it up and read it and go, oh, I hate this. So that's why I'm revealing all this, as much of this stuff as I think is reasonable now, not only to get feedback and sort of get some playtesting done, but also set expectations. We may see more artisan followers. The goal wasn't to come up with every single one I could think of. The goal was to fill a certain amount of design space. So it's easy to imagine other followers with skills, but it's tricky to imagine how they would relate to this system as a whole, especially if somebody doesn't have that whole system in their head the way I do. And I think we have enough artisan followers as it is, but that doesn't mean we might not come up with more by the time the game goes to playtesting. Thanks for watching, folks. Don't know what the next update will be. It might be the example of the kind of magic items you're going to get in the book. It might be some art. I got some concept art for the Gem Dragon Wormling. Or we might talk about the warfare rules, or how the campaign, the live stream campaign is going to work, how the live stream is going to be, what kind of content you're going to get as a result of it, and what choices the players have already made. Regardless of what happens next, it's my intention to make sure we cover all that content between Sunday. Actually, I would say cover it all by Saturday, because Sunday, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is the end of the Kickstarter, at which point, those of you who are tired of hearing about the Kickstarter, you won't have to worry about that anymore. Updates will only be for backers after that. Until next time, folks, thanks for watching. Peace out.